Hello, Vishrant. Can you please speak about today's topic, how to deal with uncertainty?
Well, everyone wants everything to be certain, but that's just not the reality of the world we live in. Nothing's really certain except that we're going to die. Everything else is up for grabs. And so the truth is, life is uncertain and as a result unsafe in a lot of ways. And we scramble for safety, we scramble to make sure that everything's okay. And in so doing so, create stress for ourselves, or we hermit ourselves away from life, not being in life because too much danger, too much uncertainty. But really, if we want to live totally, we need to be able to be okay with the unknown. We need to be okay with uncertainty. We need to step through our fears rather than serve them. So sure, life's uncertain. You don't know what's going to happen when you get into a car with someone. You're driving, someone could hit you. There could be a drunk driver or someone who's stoned out there or someone who's just dangerous. We really don't know what's going to happen next. We project that everything's going to be somehow okay, but we don't know. And we don't know if our family is really going to be safe. We do our best to make them safe, but are they really going to be safe? We don't know. There is so much uncertainty. And if we can be okay with that uncertainty, then we can relax. But if we can't be okay with that uncertainty, we cannot relax. We stay in a state of tension. But we're doing it to ourselves because the world is the way the world is. It's not going to change because we worry or get disturbed. Nothing changes. And so all of that effort into worrying is a waste of time. In a lot of ways, we create our reality by how we think. And if we're serving fear, well, we're not creating a very nice life for ourselves. But if we can be okay with life as it is, if we can be more fatalistic, what happens is meant to happen, we can have quite a nice life, a relaxed life, a life that is more in line with higher consciousness rather than suffering. But that's up to you because you create your reality by the way you think. Uncertainty is just a part of reality. It's just how it is. We don't know. And can you be okay with not knowing? Or are you going to try to make everything so safe that you're dead before the body even dies? Up to you. If you really want to have a lot of fun in this life, step through your fears. Don't serve them. Don't serve them at all. Okay. Are there any questions? Any statements? Any challenges to anything that's been said today?
The first question is, I'm looking for work at the moment, and I notice that I run a low level of anxiety. My practice is to discount the negative thoughts and worry. Is that enough to go back to zero permanently?
Okay, so the negative thoughts are probably frightened of losing something. There's probably some loss involved, not getting the job, maybe not being able to meet commitments. And so you'll need to have a look at that. What is it that you don't want to lose? The moment you become willing to accept the loss, you have a certain level of freedom. But as long as you're holding against that loss, you've got stress, you've got turmoil, you've got a problem. You're creating the problem. It's not, life is just the way it is. You don't know if you're going to get a job or you're not going to get a job. You do your best. Be okay with loss, and you can relax. Be okay with letting go, and you can relax. You can't relax while you're holding on. Not possible. There's tension in it.
Is being okay with loss practicing imagining losing what you don't want to lose?
Could be. It could be. An extreme example of that is I've been a diver, underwater diver, most of my adult life. As a matter of fact, I got my C-class license for diving with tanks when I was 10 years old. And I've always been, in the past, before awakening, I was always frightened of sharks because I had a certain level of trauma around sharks that had been created by direct experience of having a relative mauled to death by a shark. And so every time I went in the water, there was always this fear of sharks, particularly because I dived in waters where there were lots of sharks. The west end of Rottnest Island off West Australia, there's lots of sharks. The Abrolhos Islands, there's lots of sharks. And so what I would allow myself to do before I'd actually get in the water is I'd make it okay for the sharks to maul me. In my own mind, I'd just make it okay. I'd make it okay to die. And in practicing that, in allowing the fear to come about rather than resisting it, fear lost its power because I wasn't feeding it anymore with resistance. I'd moved to acceptance. I'd moved to okayness. Now that's a pretty extreme example of dealing with fear, but we can deal with fear the same way, all fears. We just allow the worst to happen in our minds. And fear then loses its power because it's not being resisted. But that's up to you. You try it and see. For me, it worked well as a diver because the fear of being eaten by sharks or being mauled by sharks could have put me off diving altogether, but it didn't because I made it okay. I made it okay. What do you make okay?
It sounds like you turned this hobby of diving into a spiritual practice.
Not deliberately, but it turns out that way, yes. Because when we practice dying, or when we practice that level of let go, we are preparing the mind for higher consciousness. We are preparing the mind to overcome the survival mechanism that's in the way of enlightenment. So even though I didn't know what I was doing as far as the spiritual practice is concerned, when I look back on it in hindsight, I can clearly see that because I was diving every weekend for years and years and years and years, and that was a practice, at some point it became very easy for me to just let go because I'd practiced a lot. People can get the idea of let go intellectually, but that doesn't change much in the psyche. You have to practice it. And if you practice, whatever you practice, you will get good at. And so I got good at letting go of my life. And that allowed me to have such an adventurous life. I didn't let fear get in my way. I went for it and lived totally, squeezed the juice out of life as a result, rather than played it safe. I never really expected to live past the age of 20 because I lived such an exciting life. I was into extreme sports, motorbike racing, car rallying, rugby, martial arts, deep sea diving, hunting. All sports that involved a risk. But I wasn't about to let fear rule my life. I could see clearly that when you let fear rule your life, you don't have much fun. You move out of flow and into stuck.
Next, we have a question from Susha.
Hi, Susha.
Hey, Bhagwan. So you were diving into the ocean with sharks. You made it okay. I have a fear of snakes. I'm going nowhere near snakes. Nothing is happening. Should I still use this technique of imagining being wrapped by snakes or something like that and be okay with it?
If you wish to. It just reminded me of a story that happened to me once. I also had a fear of snakes because snakes in Australia are quite deadly, most of them. We've got lots of poisonous snakes here that have the ability to kill you reasonably quickly. And I was going through a stage of my life where I was studying shamanism with a shaman, and he discovered that I had this fear of snakes. And we came across a big brown snake in the orchard that had been living in like a rock grove with reeds and things around it, and it was a big brown snake, very deadly. And he said, "I'd like you to go down and sleep with that snake tonight. I'd like you to go down and lay in that area and just sleep there." And being as crazy as I have been in this life, I went down and I slept with a snake that night. And when I say slept, I didn't sleep a wink. I was awake all night, listening to see if there was any movement or anything that touched me. But it was incredible because as the night went on and I got tighter and tighter and tighter, the surrender in me got deeper and deeper and deeper. And really, the only thing that we need to get enlightened is unconditional surrender. Anything you can do that allows you to learn acceptance, allows you to learn surrender, is worthy. And so, whatever you do, even if it's in your dreams, practice let go, practice acceptance, practice surrender, because this is the key to higher consciousness. This is the key to the awakening of the heart. This is the key to awakening to beingness. Unconditional surrender.
Thank you.
Oh, by the way, I don't recommend anyone ever sleep with a snake. That was just me being really, really silly.
Thank you for clarifying that. I thought I was going to go sit in the park next to the snakes that show up.
No, there's some things I did that I look back on and I go, geez.
Would you say that this is the same, this technique of imagining a loss is also a way to deal with attachments?
You mean letting go of things that you're attached to?
Yeah, people, family members, children. Is this the way to let go of the attachment, to imagine the worst?
Can you hold the line just for a tick? Can you sort that out, please, Tosh? Thanks. We've got a little bit of noise happening in the background here. Someone's decided to use a blower around the premises. Anyway, so with attachments, it's a little different. I found it's funny with attachments because I never really let go of anything except smoking cigarettes. Everything gave me up as my consciousness levels rose. And so it wasn't that I let things go. I found that everything let me go. The only thing that I really had trouble giving up and did need to give up was smoking cigarettes. And I did that some 40 years ago. And it was ridiculous. The reason I gave them up was because I had trained as a naturopath, and I thought to myself, you can't work as a naturopath giving people advice on health when you're smoking cigarettes. So I gave up smoking cigarettes.
What about people you were close to?
No, I never really gave them up. These things dropped away. As my consciousness levels rose, just things dropped away. Like up until nearly awakening, I used to like a wine, a Merlot or something like that. I grew up in a family where we all drank for meals and drank alcohol for meals, and I found that one day I just didn't feel like it anymore. Just didn't want any more. Just didn't want to have another drink. It gave me up. But consciousness levels were pretty high. This was just before enlightenment.
Okay. When we use a technique like imagining, is there a fear of getting more into the dream?
There is, but imagining can help us in lots of ways. We can heal some of our wounding by imagining. We can learn to be tenderly okay with ourselves by imagining, particularly if we get involved in doing the inner child work, which is all imagination. It's quite a powerful tool for learning to love and accept parts of yourself that have been put aside, that have been neglected or being ignored. So imagination is definitely a powerful tool in healing, but it's also a powerful tool in stepping through fear, if we want to. Imagining the worst to occur and making it okay, it gives us a lot of freedom.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susha.
Thank you.
The next question is from Indapol.
Hello, Interpol.
Hi, Vishrant. So I had a question about attachments and primal bonding. So if my attachments, when I strip everything away, that I think that I would absolutely be left with, if I were able to strip away all the rest, would be my children and my mom.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then my mom, it's quite complicated. How do we deal with
Let's look at
primal
this
bonding?
way.
Mhm.
If you had a minute left to live, what would you hang on to?
My children and my mom.
So imagine hanging on to your children in the last minute. How would that make you feel?
Desperate.
Yeah, really. Now do it again and imagine just loving them as you're dying. How does that feel?
Much better.
Yeah. You see, what we hang on to creates suffering. If we can just move from that to love, it changes completely. It actually changes into let go, because in true love, you'd hold on to nothing. Because love just loves, it doesn't take prisoners. And love is way beyond primal bonding. You just love them.
Okay.
You try it and see, practice, just love them. If you only have that 1 minute left to live, what's the last gift you want to give them? Would it be your desperation or your love?
It's very clear.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Interpol.
Next, Marcus has written a question. Vishrant, sometimes I sense my true nature as beingness, but at times I think it's all in my imagination. How do I know if it's a true satori or just my imagination?
Okay, so the thing with imagination, and the mind is capable of imagining all sorts of things. It can imagine love, it can imagine silence, it can imagine stillness, it can imagine emptiness, it can imagine nothingness, even it can imagine beingness to some degree, but it gets stale. It can imagine the infinite, but it gets stale. The real deal is never stale, it's always fresh. And so the way to examine it and see if it's real or not is related to freshness. Is it fresh? Is it here now? Or is it something that's getting stale because it's a dream that you're having? A dream that's repetitive in some way. The mind is wonderful at imagining, and it can fool you, but just keep watching it. If it's the mind, it'll get stale. If it's the real deal, it will not. It's always fresh. Okay?
The next question is from Neil.
Hello, Neil.
Hello, Vishrant. So my question is, everything that happens to us in life, is it all like already meant to happen, or is it really uncertain events, or is it leading us to somewhere?
I don't know. People love to know. They love to know the answer to things, but the truth is I don't know. I just don't know. I know that some people believe it is already written. I just don't know. I know that my mind runs true to the patterning that was put in it, the same as yours does, the same as everyone else's. And so I know it's going to do what it's programmed to do, but whether it's written or not, I just don't know. And the more you get to know, the more conscious you become, the more you realize you don't know. And the reason we want to know is because we want to somehow control things. But as your consciousness levels rise, that need to control things disappears. And so you become more honest. I don't know. I just don't know. Because you don't need to know anymore, because you're not trying to control, you're not trying to survive anymore.
Right. And I remember in one of the previous satsangs you mentioned that committing suicide is not karmically good. So why is it not karmically good?
Suicide is murder of an innocent body. Murder is not good karmically.
Okay. Right. But yogis, sometimes they talk about leaving their bodies. Isn't that also just like ending life at their own will?
I understand what you're saying, and I know that that's possible. Whether it's suicide or not, I don't know. You see, a yogi might know themselves as truth, might already be awake. And so it's not like they're really going anywhere. They're still there. See, people think they are the mind and the body. We are not the mind and body. So, look, once again, it's a question where I don't know. I just don't know. People expect that people who are awake should know everything. Well, that's just rubbish. I don't know. There's so much I don't know.
All right. Thank you, Vishrant.
Thanks, Neil.
The next question is from Shrikant.
Are you able to hear me? Yeah?
Yes, hello, Shrika.
Yeah, how are you? Yeah, I'm from Dallas, Texas. Nice to be in the Satsang. Really excited. So the question is, I intellectually understand based on, some of the spiritual practices I have undertaken so far, like I am not the person that I assume to be like a body or a mind or anything like that. I'm something much beyond that. I'm pure consciousness, awareness, the being, the living reality, unfiltered reality, and so on. However, it's said that if that sense of self doesn't drop or disappear, that illusion of the self is not seen through, you don't really feel or experience that moment to moment, living reality. But intellectually I understand it, but it is not happening for me. No matter what I do, it doesn't, or the self is not dropping. It's like almost like you have to do something else, like an intuitionally, some intuition should arise, which is beyond the mind to see the self through, or should drop on its own, which is like kind of waiting for something to happen.
I do know the answer to what you're asking.
Sure.
Okay. So for me, I had 1,000 satori's before awakening, and the I kept coming back, the self kept coming back. But after awakening, when awareness stayed aware of itself, the I dropped by itself, it just dropped. The mind could not in any way believe that it was real any longer, because awareness was aware of itself. And so it dropped. It dropped as a result of enlightenment. Or you could say satori, that was continuing. But up until that point, it kept coming back. It kept resurrecting itself.
Okay. So do the spiritual practices like meditation or self-inquiry or those, do they help? Or is some people say that they themselves get in the way of dropping the self because they perpetuate the game of the self? It's just like kind of boosting somebody's spiritual ego or something like that. They don't really help. Or some people say they do help. I've seen evidences both cases. I've seen some people wake up based on the things that they practiced. Some people just got it spontaneously. They never did any spiritual practice at all, or they never meditated even for a single day. So I kind of wonder, like, if there is some randomness to it, or is there a cause and effect, or there's nothing there? I mean, it's...
The ego can use most spiritual practices to bolster itself, because it starts thinking it's special, because it does meditation, or it does self-inquiry, or it does asanas. The only thing that I found, the only spiritual practice I found that the ego can't use to serve itself or use to escape in, is the practice of openness.
Openness.
The practice of openness. Always being open. Anytime you close, you open up. The ego can't survive openness because the ego itself is a contraction.
Oh, open meaning like open to experiences, open to whatever is happening in the present moment. Is that what it means?
No defenses. No defense systems whatsoever. So no contractions, no resistance to anything.
Oh, okay, got it. No resistance, okay.
Yeah. And that works. The ego cannot defeat openness. It cannot use openness to hide in. It cannot use openness in any way. Openness actually destroys the ego, because the ego is a form of closure.
Right, it's form of a contracted energy, right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. So, okay, great. Thank you very much, sir. Yeah.
It's nice that you've contacted us all the way from Dallas.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Next, there is a question from Indipol.
Hello, Indipol.
Hi again, Vishrant. Okay. Question. I read a book, Many Lives, Many Masters by Dr. Brian Weiss. Do you know that book?
No, I don't know it. I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Okay. All right. So it just talks about past lives and, just the concept, I think, in the Western world. I might be messing up sort of how I'm relaying this, but basically that, we do have past lives, and in the Western world, that's not such an accepted concept. And relating to that, I was curious, as far as, do past lives set us up for this life, as far as karma and our journey?
Okay, so what I know about past lives is I started remembering them when I was 12 years old, and I was in Catholic boarding school as a boarder. And I found myself as basically as nothing. Yeah, I was playing the part of a dragon's tail in a play on stage, and I just experienced self as absolute nothing. And I didn't know what had happened. They took me to the medical centre and they thought I'd hit my head, but I hadn't hit my head. I'd had a satori. And after that, I started remembering a previous life. I started remembering what I did. I started remembering my name. I started remembering the language that I used. I remembered how old I was. I remembered how I died. And I was very young, and to me this was all rubbish because I was a Catholic and Catholics don't have past lives. But it persisted. It persisted into my 20s and then into my 30s. That particular memory kept resurrecting itself. And then in my 30s, about 33, I started remembering all the lives before that. And there was hundreds of them. And people think, well, you remember your lives and it's a good thing. Well, no, you remember the highlights, and the highlights are usually the traumas. And so in most of my past lives, I was either into spirituality as a monk or a priest, or I was a soldier, or I was both. And I remembered the battles, I remembered the bloodshed, I remembered the horrors. And what it gave me was, I don't want to do this again. I've been around the block too many times. It's time. It's time to stop this samsara, this cycle of birth and what I would call suffering and death. And enlightenment is the ticket out of that, because you die before the body does, as an I, and it doesn't come back again. And so I'm talking to you, but there's no sense whatsoever of anyone here talking to you. The one that used to live here died 22 years ago. There's just talking now. Nobody talking.
Mm. Wow. Okay. You've also spoken about the dark night of the soul. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
It was a phrase coined by Carl Jung, a very famous psychologist. It's about what happens when you finally allow yourself to feel what's underneath everything. Because what we do is we develop a whole pile of defense systems to protect ourselves from feeling past wounding and past traumas and past damage. And we sit in this raft that we've created, we meet the world with, which is part of our personality. But underneath this raft is all the things we haven't dealt with. And as a person becomes willing to feel what's under there comes out. Or they may not be willing to feel what's under there and it comes out because of some kind of reaction to something. And the dark night of the soul goes on until everything is emptied out, until all the wounds of the heart have been healed. And I got in touch with that through the Rajneesh washing machine, the mystery school that Osho Rajneesh was running. I was involved in that. I did, I did a lot of months. I think I did 15 or 16 months in mystery school, being undone and having everything emptied out. And then I went on and trained as a psychotherapist, which was another, let's open you up and empty everything out. And everything got emptied out. But it's like an onion. You don't know how many layers there are. You get through one and you go, oh, it's the end, thank God for that. And then another layer. I had a quite traumatic childhood, so there was quite a few layers of different repressed emotionalities, repressed traumas that needed to be released. And so the dark night of the soul went on for a while, but I had a willingness to meet it. I had a willingness to be okay with it. And that's what's required, a willingness. But unfortunately, you and I are programmed to avoid pain and chase pleasure or comfort. And so that primal program goes against us healing the wounds of our heart. But if you really want to heal the wounds, you just become willing to feel them. That's all that's required, your willingness to feel, rather than your willingness to avoid.
Does it get progressively harder, Vishrant? In the analogy of the onion, as you're going deeper?
No, it depends what's there. It doesn't necessarily get progressively harder. It depends on what you've actually got there, what kind of traumas that you've actually repressed inside of you, held inside of you, and what level of pain body is attached to that. The problem with people who are victim orientated, people who turn themselves into victims of situations and then run the story over and over again in their head, is whatever happened in the first place traumatized them and wound them, but every time they run it over in their head as a victim, they produce more energy, they produce more pain body. And so one of the things about healing the wounds of the heart is you've got to stop producing more. And so it's like you're in a boat that's got a hole in the bottom, and that's you producing more by being a victim. The hole, it's letting water in, and you're trying to bail it out, you're trying to heal it. Well, it doesn't work. You've got to stop being a victim. And then you can bail it out by allowing yourself to feel what's there. And that, it takes a fair bit, because quite often we've got a fair bit inside. In our society, we're not programmed to express, we're programmed to repress. And so most human adults have quite a large pain body. And they do go through the dark night of the soul if they're willing to feel it, if they're willing to open up, or if something traumatizes them and they get forced into it.
And are there various pain bodies? These are all new phrases. I'm sorry I'm asking you to elaborate on some of them.
We just go into injustice wounding. It's not fair. A lot of us were taught as children that there's such a thing as fairness. But if we're programmed that way, we get into the real world and it's actually not fair. We get all this wounding because we don't think it's fair. It's injustice wounding. We repress these feelings about having it not being fair, and that gets stuck as a pain body. So that's just one type of pain body. And in getting in touch with that it's like people think, oh, it's just pain. It's not just pain. When we get in touch with our wounding, there's helplessness and hopelessness attached inside of it, which is really yucky because it makes us feel really bad. But if we're willing to feel it, it can go, it can pass, it can go, and we can become sattvic. And so most people you meet are rafting. They're sitting above their pain bodies with a personality that lives probably projecting to the future. Things will get better later. And if we look at a lot of religions, that's what they sell. Things will get better later, heaven. And that's like an opiate that takes people away from what's inside of them now.
I hear you. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question is from Abay.
Hello, Abai.
Hi, Vishrant. Vishrant, when something happens and I contract, my breath becomes very shallow. So, should I work on my breath at that time, release it, or I should be looking at the belief system or whatever has made me contract?
Well, you can do both. I use the breath extensively in training myself to let go, because I know that if we breathe out fully, the mind can let go a lot easier. And so I use the outward breath a lot to let go of things that my mind wasn't in agreement with. And then I went and examined the belief systems that were supporting that non-agreement. And I undid them because I wasn't interested in getting caught the same way. And needless to say, I failed heaps of times, but I kept going. I kept going. I kept undoing and undoing until things would happen that used to trigger me, used to contract me, but they no longer did, because the belief systems that supported that contraction weren't there anymore. They'd had enough doubt put in them to have lost their power. I was just talking to Interpol about injustice wounding, and I had a fair bit of injustice wounding because I'd been brought up like everyone else, thinking that life should be fair, and it took a while for me to start really challenging that belief that around fairness, things should be fair, people should be fair, and I finally saw right through it. It's like, no, look at the animal kingdom. Nothing's fair. The big animals eat the small animals, the old animals, the sick animals. That's what happens. There's no such thing as fairness. It's a mind-made understanding that's out of touch with reality. And we get into the human world, and of course humans aren't fair either. They're just not. There's nothing wrong with you being fair, because that's the way of the heart, to take care and to be fair. But expecting it to come from outside of you is really out of touch with the reality of the world we live in.
That's right. And thank you for this comparison, or the insight of seeing the world itself like there's no fairness in the world, in the animal kingdom.
No.
That helps me a lot to understand this at a deeper level.
Yeah, there's nothing, but I'll say it again, there's nothing wrong with you being fair and you taking care of people, but expecting it outside of you is crazy, because it's just not the way it is. Some people might be fair, but they might not be fair. You don't know.
Mm.
You know, we see people getting hurt in accidents. We see people getting sick with cancer or something else like that. And we think that's not fair. They're so young, or they're so innocent, or whatever. But it's just what is. There's no such thing as fairness.
And whenever someone behaves in an unfair way with me, then the mind goes like, I'm going to do the same to you. Then you will understand. So this is something I don't want to do, but it comes to my mind.
That's,
And
yeah. Look, if someone's being unfair, if someone's being unjust, if someone's slandering you or libeling you in some way, that's just running true to their pattern, and they're just running true. They can't help it. You know, if you're programmed that way, you might be that way as well. And so there, but for the grace of God goes you. As a spiritual teacher, I'm telling the truth worldwide constantly. And I get a lot of slander, a lot of people saying things that aren't true. But it's just what is. What I discovered in this world is the darkness has to kill the light to survive. And it's okay. It's okay that it tries to do that. So what? It's just what is.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vishrant.
The next question has been written by Marcus. Why is formal meditation so important?
If you are present to reality, it's not. But if you went to school and learnt to live in your head, and now you live in your head, it's very important, because formal meditation trains you to get out of your head and back into reality. It starts creating a default pattern of being with what is real, maybe your breath, rather than what you think, which is not real. And so meditation is simply being aware of what is real. That is meditation. Formal meditation enables that. It's like reclaiming reality from the dream that you've been lost in because you got sent to school for so many years and learnt to live in your head. And so formal meditation is good news, not bad news. It's wonderful stuff. It's about being present to reality. It's about programming the mind to start just being present to what is real rather to what you think.
The next question has been written by Diane. Wouldn't a past life just be a memory in the awake state, an experience?
Yes, it would be. The initial memory of past life, I was curious. I was interested to see what would come of it. And it expanded itself as years went by. More memory of how that person lived, the name of that person, what the person did, how they felt about things. And the next lot that came, I didn't want to know, but it just kept coming. The dream kept coming. The memory of life after life after life kept coming. It lasted about a week and a bit. And I didn't want it. It's like I'd had enough. And so I consciously stopped allowing it to come because I just didn't want it anymore. I'd seen enough. We get born over and over again, and we die over and over again, and we suffer over and over again. And we can get out of samsara by surrendering our life to truth, by waking up.
The next question is from Tiagna.
Hello, Tiagna.
Hi, Vishrant. My question was just that I feel like a lot of fear has developed from my last Satori, and maybe I don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, well, you're not okay with going crazy. You see, the two main fears that humans have are the fear of death and the fear of insanity, which is the fear of loss of control. Now, if you can be okay with the fear of death and you can be okay with the fear of insanity, you can get free. But as long as you serve those fears, you will be stuck in the mind. And so I became willing to die, and I also became willing to go insane, and I became willing to let go of control, basically, and put everything in God's hands. But that's the only way. There is no other way. As long as you are hanging on to, I don't want to be insane, that attachment keeps you stuck. Very, very stuck. And it's supported by fear, which is not even real. It's a projection. Look, in Satori, you do lose your mind. But there's something inside of you that's not willing, so it's holding you locked in the matrix of the mind. when Satori occurs, the unknown presents itself, because the mind can't possibly know about beingness because it doesn't have any reference points. So the mind can't make any sense of it. And so it throws up fear. Surrender. Allow whatever happens to happen. Put your hands in God. Give yourself to God. Give yourself to truth. Let go, let go, let go.
Thank you.
Okay, darling.
The next question has been written by Brian. I have a profound love for Zen, Dzogchen, Sufism, and Taoism. Are these attachments in the way of finding myself as truth?
If you have a profound love of Zen, you'll understand that you have to let go of everything. Having a profound love and having a practice is very different. Zen is about nothing, nothing, and nothing. Let go, let go, let go. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, understanding Zen, understanding Taoism, a whole different thing, isn't it, really? That's just collecting knowledge. Understanding Sufism, just collecting knowledge. The collection of knowledge doesn't make you more conscious, doesn't enlighten you. It just means you've collected knowledge. If you really love these things, practice what they teach, particularly Zen. Let go, let go, let go. Simplify, simplify, simplify. I also love Zen, but I practiced Zen. It's up to you. What do you practice? Give up collecting knowledge and practice what's being taught. It's the practice that brings you home, not the intellectual understanding.
Next, we have a question from Marcus.
Hey, Vishrant.
Hello.
I have a question about basically how beingness connects with the material world in the form of like being healthy. Like, because I know that how important exercise is, but because exercise affects the mind a certain way. Can you talk about how doing things like exercise and staying healthy affects like the spiritual health?
Okay, so the body is a spacesuit. It really is. It's just a spacesuit. It's a biological spacesuit with an onboard computer that's crazy enough to think that it's you, but it's not you. It's just crazy. And the spacesuit is being powered by beingness, pure awareness. Now, if you don't take care of the spacesuit, it will deteriorate and die. And so it's good to take care of the spacesuit, even though it's nothing to do with what you truly are or who you truly are. So you take care of the spacesuit because the spacesuit's going to be used to visit this plane. And as far as I'm concerned, that's about it. Wonderful spacesuit, taken care of, but that's up to you. If you don't take care of the spacesuit, well, suffer the consequences of the spacesuit getting sick and dying.
So like, it's gonna sound silly, but lately I've been thinking that, like, eating not good all the time and not exercising at all is making it harder for me to get out of my head.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, look, my whole thing about getting out of my head was being present to reality, being present to what is real around me. present moment awareness of what is real rather than present moment awareness of what is not real, which is what you think. And that takes practice. Whether you're eating correctly or not eating correctly is not that relevant. What's relevant is where is your awareness at? Are you living in your head, or is your awareness on what's real?
Right. One more thing, which has been a big trauma of mine for my whole life. I would say the biggest one I'm aware of right now is it's like a father wound, because of it's basically it's a sad story, but it hits me where it hurts, and I still haven't felt like I feel that pain any less than I have while practicing openness.
What pain's that?
It's the pain of having an absent father. And it just hurts.
So does that give you the feeling of not being loved?
Yeah, it makes me feel like an alien. Like no one understands.
So how old were you when your father left?
It's like 4.
Okay. Okay, so you had an absent father, so that part's gone. What about you championing your own inner child, which sounds like it could be wounded? Have you ever looked at inner child work?
I have, I just don't know how to do it.
Oh, it's pretty easy, really. You just use your imagination. You imagine that 4-year-old, or you go back in your memory to that 4-year-old. Imagine how that 4-year-old was feeling at the time when Dad left, and you go back, and as an adult, you go back and you champion that child, and you say to that child, I'm going to be with you from now on. You never need to be alone again. This is where it begins. And then you go back to every year to that child again, and there'll be something there, something will have happened, and you go back and you champion the child again. You tell that child you're there for them, you've got their back, you'll never leave them, you'll always be there for them. And what you're doing is developing a healthy relationship with the damage that's inside of yourself as a result of the absentee parent. You understand?
I understand.
But you have to do it. Thinking about it doesn't work. You have to do it. You have to go down and do it. I started doing this sometime in the 80s. I had a vision of a little boy underneath a table, and it was just a vision. And I thought, oh, that's odd. And then I looked closer, and I noticed the little boy was me when I was about 2 years old, crawling around the floor under a table. And I went there, and I just held the child. And I just held it. That's all I did. I didn't know what else to do, but it just felt so nourishing to hold that child. And then I continued on and found all the other children inside of myself at different ages that had been through different traumas. And I went back as an adult and I was there for them. Holding them, loving them, telling them I was going to be there for them. And in that way, I was starting to heal my own psyche. You understand?
Yeah, so it's a very intuitive process, you would say.
Well, I'd say it's intuitive, yeah. And it works. It works. But you've got to do it.
Right.
And when I worked as a psychotherapist, I used hypnosis to take people back into their past, into their early childhood, right through their teenage years, looking at any trauma, any kind of pain body that might have been there, and having people go back and experience that child and love that child, offer the support to that child, and also feel what was there. And in feeling it, healing it.
If you offered a course, I would definitely attend that course with the official Vishrant guidance.
I don't work as a psychotherapist anymore. I haven't done for about 22 years. Yeah, not my cup of tea anymore. I like just having chats with people like yourself. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of gone beyond the mind.
Kind of.
Gone beyond the mind.
Okay, Vishrant.
Mm.
I'm gonna just imagine that young wounded Marcus and be there to love him, and all the details and stuff that'll come intuitively, and just do it.
Well, that's best.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Look, if you go online and check out, use Google and check out Championing the Inner Child, you'll find a heap of information on it. It's quite a profound form of psychotherapy that I know works.
Awesome.
There was a guy called Bradshaw that put out a heap of tapes on the subject, videos on the subject. Very good stuff.
What was his name again?
Bradshaw.
Bradshaw.
Yeah. Look up Bradshaw Championing the Inner Child and you'll find heaps of books that he put out and heaps of tapes he put out. And he was on the money. He was very good at what he did.
Lovely.
Yeah. I'm past the hour. So thank you for Satsang.